Today, NATO's defense ministers will sit down with hopes that Russia will engage in, quote, meaningful dialogue, choosing diplomacy instead of confrontation in its current border buildup around Ukraine. The Secretary General of that alliance saying President Putin continues to amass troops around its smaller neighbor, despite reports Tuesday that some were withdrawing. Here now to discuss the implications in this country of how the White House is handling happenings on the other side of the world, along with some in-state political developments, are Republican strategist Tab Berg and Democratic strategist Ed Emerson. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning.
With the residue still on him of the chaotic and deadly withdrawal of American troops in Afghanistan, the current tensions along the Russian-Ukrainian border amount to the second major international crisis the Biden administration has had to confront. Now, Biden has been taking a lot of criticism for the sanction and diplomatic activity employed so far. Yesterday was Biden's first speech to the country about this matter. Grade him, Tab. How'd he do?
I'd give him a D or an F at this point, and it's a dangerous D or F for America. And Putin has been on a non-stop expansion since he took over from Boris Yeltsin. Chechnya, Georgia, Crimea, and Ukraine. And we need America to put a strong front up to say, you know, when we put a line in the sand, we actually have to stand by that line.
And then, Ed, is this not a strong enough line that's been drawn so far? How do you think the president did yesterday and what he had to share with the American public?
I think he did what he had to do. He did well. I would give him a B plus on his speech if I were grading it. Putin's a madman. He's not just an autocrat and a dictator. He's legitimately off balance. He has absolutely put down a gauntlet that Joe Biden has stood up to. I mean, we have absolutely backed him up. Now he's talking about withdrawing forces. Diplomacy seems to be working on a pretty good level. We've got NATO allied, despite the last president of the United States almost destroying the alliance that we had put together since World War II. The Germans, the French, the English, all the big components of NATO are allied against Vladimir Putin, and we're going to see what his next move is. But I think he's got nowhere to go other than backwards.
Okay. Now, warnings have already gone out to the American public about the impact this conflict in Eastern Europe may cause within our own borders, like a roller coaster stock market and even higher gas prices than what families are enduring right now. President Biden's already been beaten up about the inflation situation tied to the pandemic, approval numbers plummeting. Can he and those in his party up for re-election in the midterms withstand more economic hurt with voters headed to the polls later this year? Ed?
Oh, absolutely. No question. We sent $1,400 checks to the United States of America. We're fighting for clean water. We're fighting for roads and bridges. We've put money in to address these different issues facing the country. Folks, 200 million people have been vaccinated in this time. The pandemic has definitely set us back. No question about it. Makes it difficult to do anything because that's your point of departure for anything that you're trying to do. But I think Biden has got it. I think he's doing a good job. I think he's going to continue to do a good job. I think, no question, we've got a tough road to hoe on the congressional and midterm elections this fall. I think the key is to talk about the good things that we've done, to talk about the money that we've sent out, to talk about the different infrastructure and programs that we put together that are contained in the Build Back Better bill. And we're trying to do the right thing.
All righty. Tab?
I see almost exactly the opposite. I think when Biden talks about how wonderful things are going now, he just looks out of touch. He looks like one of those presidents who doesn't understand the price of milk. Americans are paying more for dinner table issues. I mean, for dinner table items, for more for beef, more for eggs, more for gas to take their kids to school. And every time he talks about how great things are and all the things he's accomplished, he just looks out of touch.
Okay. Staying with national maneuvering, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, Mark Rassicot, has sent a stinging letter to current Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, which at its root is really about what he sees as destructive blind loyalty to former President Trump as the party tries to craft its future. He very pointedly says to her that what the party's done with resisting the January 6th Commission and censuring Reps Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for their support of it is wrong, saying, quote, "How is it that an official inquiry undertaken to pursue and determine the truth can be so threatening? How is it that faithfulness to one's country and fellow citizens can be so precipitously and eagerly sacrificed in exchange for political victory or the pursuit of power, or both?" Tab, your reaction to this letter, bomb or blip?
Well, no, I think it's significant, but I think the bigger part of it was his objection to calling the January 6th riots a normal protest. It was not. Breaking into the Capitol is not normal protest, and it shouldn't be acceptable by Republicans from any level. But I also wouldn't go so far as to call the January 6th Commission a bipartisan commission. Republicans did not get to pick their members. Republicans did not have an opportunity to weigh in equally. So it is very much a partisan political commission that's designed to create political points for the campaign. But he is absolutely right in the language saying that January 6th is normal protest is unacceptable.
Alrighty, Ed, was this letter a bomb or a blip on the radar?
Well, someone has to say it. I mean, someone in the Republican Party has to stand up. I mean, this is not legitimate political discourse. Hang Mike Pence was the chant echoing through the halls of the Capitol. I mean, I would say no one thinks it's a legitimate political discourse, but it's the RNC. It's the Republican National Committee. The chair of the National Committee putting out this letter and condemning Liz Cheney, who's a great Republican and from a long lineage of great Republicans, and Adam Kinzinger, an Iraq vet. Not good enough, right? Not good enough for the Republican Party. And I think it's tough. I think the dialogue inside these meetings has got to be intense. And I think slowly but surely, a majority of Republicans are coming out who know that they need to dump Trump. I mean, that's the key. This guy is not the leader of anything. And he's just a bully. And he's bullied Republicans around the country into believing that his way is the best way. It's not.
Okay.
It's a horrible thing.
Gentlemen, we're almost out of time. Quick question. We've been talking about the president's lagging approval ratings in the Golden State yesterday. There was a Berkeley IGS poll release, shows the latest numbers for Governor Gavin Newsom, not so great, 48% approval, 47% disapproval. Ed, is it something to be concerned about now or not? What's happening here?
I think it's reflective of day-to-day slings and arrows of outrageous fortune of being the governor of California. You're responsible for everything. Do something about it. Homelessness is at the top of his mind, morning, noon, and night, and yet finding a solution for it is the most difficult piece. We need to find something that everyone agrees to, that going forward, we seem to have the money and the resources for it. I think Gavin is going to go a long way towards solving the issue of homelessness in the state of California. I think we've got a long way to go for the election, and he's got a serious chunk of change in the bank.
Okay, before we run out of time, got to get Tab in here. We've got State Senator Dawley that's jumped into this race. Also, Anthony Trimino, who is one of the candidates in the recall. Should Governor Newsom be worried, Tab?
Well, I think he should. I think, as Ed had mentioned, the governor's talking a lot and spending a lot on homelessness, yet 2/3 of Californians think he's on the wrong track. And much like the city of Sacramento, we've seen this governor talk and talk and talk about homelessness, but not actually do anything. We've seen in San Francisco the impact of what happens when we take away the law enforcement, we take away the ability of local government to really push people into treatment. And we know what the solutions are. We've been talking about the solutions for years, but unfortunately, neither the governor nor the mayor seems able to do anything about it.
I do have to point out one thing, Tab, on the do anything. The governor created kind of a national model during the pandemic with Project Room Key that's become Project Home Key. We're going to have you back to talk about the homelessness issue. So we're going to have to put a pin in it right there. But as always, I appreciate your insight from the both of you. Thank you.